I tell you what, I have seen some braggarts in my day, but Dr. Ali Rashad Richey, oh, I'm sorry, did I call him doctor? No. Mr. Ali Rashad Richey is probably the worst. You all know who he is. He's been on all kinds of talk shows, and boy, does he have an ego. This is his own webpage here, and listen to this crap. He starts out Emmy-nominated broadcaster, political strategist, news analyst, business executive, university professor, lecturer, entrepreneur, and advocate. Oh, my. But okay, we'll let him slide on that kind of stuff. But let's read down a little bit further. Known as political policy and socioeconomic juggernaut, he's calling himself a political policy and socioeconomic juggernaut. Oh, my. And by the way, obviously you're not a grammar juggernaut. Known as political? Come on, it's your own webpage. Proofread the damn thing.
Okay, that was weird.
As a man of faith, and obviously humility is not a Christian practice, okay? As a man of faith who believes politics, policy, and spiritual values are socially connected, Mr. Richey also completed seminarian education and earned his PhD at the internationally recognized Schofield Graduate School, where his qualitative research focused on the global effect of Western religion on politics, policy, and government. A number of things. I went over this in my previous video, but if you're wondering, this is an internationally recognized school. How come I haven't heard of it? Well, there's a reason. This is the school. That's right. The internationally recognized Schofield whatever is a small church in Modesto, California. It doesn't have a library. It doesn't seem to have anything associated with an institute of higher education. I went through this again in my previous video. In my opinion, and I'll stand by it, he does not have a PhD. Not a real one. This is a diploma mill. And if he wants to defend himself, he's more than welcome to come on my show and run the test with me. We'll see. Okay, Mr. Richey, anytime you want to come on this show, I'm game. And you may be wondering, affect? It turns out that affect can be used as a noun. I've never used it that way. I don't think I've ever seen it used that way before, but I looked it up. But it can't be used like this. It is purely about emotions. He has a typo in the title of his dissertation. That's right, a typo in the title of his dissertation. Oh! Not unless you think that politics, policy, and government can have emotion. But let's read on. Making Mr. Richey, sorry, I have to correct this, a rare double doctorate scholar. Oh my God. My education background is deeper than his, and I don't call myself a scholar. I'm pretty smart in some things, and I'm pretty stupid in others. And in fact, all the years that I spent in graduate school did nothing more than push out real practical stuff out of my brain and replaced it with a lot of highfalutin stuff that I can't use. That's a little bit of exaggeration. But whatever the case, I don't go around calling myself a scholar, but my education background's far deeper than his. So, sorry, it's Mr. Richey from now on. It says also, being a student of leadership principles and criminal justice reform, Dr. Richey completed studies in executive leadership from Cornell University, I think he probably took some online classes, and is currently matriculating at Birmingham School of Law, finishing his Juris Doctorate degree, or law degree. Gee, I wonder if they know that his PhD is a total fraud. I might have to tell them. It goes on. Dr. Richey is a noted international scholar. Oh, he's a scholar again, and university lecturer, which he already said, who provides lectures on topics related to race relations in America, American government policy, politics, faith and politics. In other words, all the stuff he likes to just go and yammer on. I would hate to be in his class because it's going to be all Dr. Richey's opinions. Oh, I'm sorry, Doctor. Damn it, I got to quit doing that. Mr. Richey's ideas. Now, he goes on to claim that he has an educational doctorate at Clark Atlanta, and technically he does. But guess what we're going to do? We're going to read his dissertation, and we're going to have a lot of fun because it is LOCO. Hello out there. I am trying to get through.
With his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning, it's time for Johnny Walker Dread to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnny Walker Dread Show.
Okay, so here is the educational doctorate. I don't have a lot of respect for these things, and you'll see why here in a moment. It's actually in a very poor form for me to present, so I actually had to convert this thing to a Microsoft Word document, and I'm going to be working off of it. And so here it is, the Microsoft Word version of Mr. Ali Rashad Richey's educational doctorate. And he goes on to list all of his highfalutin degrees and stuff. We should really put a quotation mark around this one here. This is PhD. There you go. That's much more accurate. And we go on down here and we read the title. Well, let's just skim on down. And we read the title, and it states, "A policy and political analysis of how America's College Promise Act of 2018 could impact higher education access non-traditional Black college students." Now, why did I highlight the part in green? Well, if you read this, it sounds like there's this bill that's going through Congress, and he's doing his dissertation on how it could impact Black college students if it passes. There's only one small problem. When he wrote this dissertation, the bill had long been defeated. The Promise Act of 2018 can't impact higher education access of non-traditional Black college students because it never was passed. And of course, he's going to bellyache throughout this dissertation on why it didn't pass. So why did he write it like this? He made a mistake. He screwed up his title. It should have said Promise Act of 2018 could have impacted.
That was local, but not in an entertaining way. Okay.
Criminy. Jesus, man, come on. It's the title. All right. That ain't the worst of it. It gets bad. So go ahead. The preliminaries are all very typical. Now, I highlighted this part in green here. It says, "Heartfelt appreciation goes to my committee members, Dr. Trevor Turner and Dr. Rodney Jackson." And including his advisor, that makes 3 people. 3 people on a dissertation committee? Come on. I mean, maybe a master's thesis. I've seen committees of 3 on master's theses, but on a doctorate, there needs to be 5. And the reason why is you have to have at least one person from an outside department to keep things honest. That's why they have that rule. 5 with 1 outsider. There's only 3 here. They're all from his own little inner circle, and that's the problem. He has significant problems throughout this dissertation, and they all went ahead and passed it. They should never have approved this dissertation. They should have never let him defend on it. This is junk, and we're going to see why. And it says, "I thank our fearless leader who has created and oversees one of the most efficient and academically rigorous departments in higher education." Okay, I get it. He's going to say some nice things about the department chair. Unfortunately, the rigor in this doctorate is probably the lowest I've ever seen, and you'll see why. Move on. Here's something that stuck out at me. A doctoral dissertation with 1 table and no figures. All right. All right. Now, the first few mistakes he makes are like things that nobody should make, but they're not degree killers. But let's go through them anyway. It starts institutional effectiveness in higher education as it relates to best practices for student retention has been an ongoing debate for years. What's wrong with this? Well, if it's an ongoing debate, why do you cite a source that's 14 years old? If it's an ongoing debate, you can't find something current to cite? Really? You have to go back 14 years?
Loco! Loco! Huh?
His committee members didn't see this? Keep in mind that there is a rule in education that anything beyond 10 years is probably outdated. This is 14 years. And something that could have been easily updated. First sentence. All right. Notably, a person's socioeconomic status, SES, encompasses the entirety of their life from financial security to educational attainment. That seems to be a little bit exaggerated, but okay. I'll let it go. And oftentimes, don't say that. It's often. And often, educational attainment determines a person's place in their respect socioeconomic classes. 3 people cruising this doctorate, and not one of them caught that typo. Determines a person's place in their respect socioeconomic classes. Okay, it's a typo, not the end of the world, but it should not have happened. I mean, okay, on page 40, fine. On page 1, the opening paragraph, second sentence, and not one of those 3 people caught this?
Hey, I'm the most local person in here.
All right, well, let's go on down. Believe me, this ain't the end of it. That's small potatoes compared to what we're going to see. Okay, I'll just cruise on down here. Those with a low socioeconomic status has been found to directly correlate, I think, those with a low socioeconomic status have been found. Those clearly refers to plural. To directly correlate with poor academic achievement and overall quality of life. That's an interesting statement. Where did you get it? No citation. You talk about a direct correlation. When you talk about correlations, you're talking about research results. Somebody has done the measurement and they have found this correlation between these 2 things. Why don't you cite it? All right, we move on. In the United States, more than 39% of African Americans are living in poverty. Okay, we'll move on. I don't have any issues with the Bray reference. Moreover, members of this minority group are likely to be born into poverty. Now, this is a smaller nit on my part, but if you're writing a large-scale document, an important one, you want to avoid this kind of stuff. When you say that they are likely, what does that mean? 50% or greater? I don't know. So this is one of those abstract adjectives that really should be tightened up. But let's move on. He says they're likely to be born into poverty and permanently condemned to a low socioeconomic status for their entire lives. Where's the citation for that? Keep in mind his claim. He's saying that likely, I assume that means 50% or more. I don't know why it would be less than 50%, but who knows? He is saying that they are likely to be born into poverty and permanently condemned to a low socioeconomic status. So what does that mean? That means more than 50% that are of this minority group are born into poverty and are poor their entire lives, right? That's a pretty hefty claim. Where's the citation for that? This is one I really dislike. Many Black Americans never attempt to enter a higher education institution due to challenges associated with tuition costs and fees. Okay, here's my little tip for you out there trying to write a large-scale document, okay? Avoid saying things like, many of this do this. Many could be 5 of them, could be 1,000, could be 1,000,000, who knows? But you could write this for anything. Many white Americans never attempt to enter a higher education system due to challenges associated with tuition costs and fees. That's true. Many Hindus, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Many Native Americans, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Many Asians never attempt. Yeah. So it's an empty statement. It means nothing. Furthermore, the percentage that try to get into higher education but can't because they don't have enough money to pay for tuition has probably been studied. There's probably an actual number associated with that. It would be really nice if you did some research on that. If you're not going to do the research, don't put these kind of statements in your dissertation. Okay, now you might be wondering, well, no, wait a minute. This stuff that he's talking about so far isn't that bad. Well, some of it is pretty bad, but you're right. If this was all there was, okay, I'd say that it's a very poor quality EDD. I'm going to make a bigger claim. This should have never been accepted, and the problems are going to get even more severe. We have here another example. Consequently, many researchers, I know he's going to put some citations now, right? Because if he has found many researchers that are going to make this kind of claim, whatever that's going to be, he has the citations in hand. So let's read it. Consequently, many researchers have noted the importance of increasing accessibility to higher education. Well, nobody's going to debate that, but okay. Which can align employment with required educational degrees and skills. No citation. Many researchers and no citation. That is bad.
That was LOCO, but not in an entertaining way. Okay.
But again, that's nothing in comparison to what we're going to see here coming up. And I know you're probably getting impatient, but just hang on. In the United States, blacks or African Americans face twice the unemployment rate of white Americans. And he has here ethnic and racial minorities. In other words, he doesn't know the author. 2017. But here's the problem I have when I'm reading this. Go back and think about what he's saying. Blacks or African Americans face twice the unemployment rate of white Americans. We're talking about the unemployment rate. Why is he going to some article that has no known author when he could go to the U.S. Census and find out the true number? There are plenty of real government websites that one can go to find out what the unemployment rate is between white Americans and black African Americans. Let's take a look at his citation. It says here, ethnic and racial minorities and socioeconomic status. 2017, the American Psychological Association. Since when does the APA do census analysis on unemployment? So let's take a look at the actual source. And here it is. The American Psychological Association, ethnic and racial minorities and socioeconomic status. And let's see what the unemployment statement is. African American unemployment rates are typically double that of Caucasian Americans. African American men working full-time earn only 72% of the average earnings of comparable Caucasian men. But where was this research done? Who came out with these numbers? Well, you may think, well, it's this Rogers dude, right? But no, the Rogers is inside the period, so that refers only to the last sentence. So if we go up, we will find that there's no discussion of it. You can't use this as a source. There's no author, there's no hint at how this data was collected, and there's far better sources for this information than this web page. For example, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. That might be a good place to go to. Yep. We have real current data here. Household data. Unemployment rates by age, sex, race, and Hispanic or Latino ethnicity. 2021, 2022. Those are where you get these statistics. You don't go to the APA. The APA article was simply somebody posting some information. He found it somewhere and stuck it up there. It is not a primary source. Now let's think here. Primary versus secondary sources. When was that taught? Gee, about 7th grade? Come on. Get with the program, Mr. Richey. Primary sources. They're a good idea.
I'll spell it for you. D-U-M-M-Y, period.
But this next one is really gold. Listen to this. In addition, recent data indicates the average cost of higher education is a staggering $160,000. Okay, which presents a much greater hardship for Black families due to their statistically lower income ratio compared to other racial groups. Well, you really don't even need a citation for that. If you have already found that Black families earn less than white families, you can go ahead and make the claim that that makes it harder for them to get into college because of the expense involved. But whatever the case, he decides to quote Black Student College year 2020. I'm going to put a little note on that one. 2020, huh? All right, let's go down and take a look at this one. Okay, Black student college graduation rates remain low. Okay, but modest progress begins to show. This is the Journal of Black in Higher Education. I guess what this is a journal dedicated to whether you're wearing black attire or black tennis shoes has an effect on your schooling, I suppose. I think he meant to say the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education. It turns out he made the same typo in another citation. Good grief. But here's something that's interesting. Take a look here. It's listed here as 2017. Wait, he said 2020. Boy, that makes it look a lot fresher, doesn't it? But he didn't think anybody would bother to look up the original citation. He didn't know me very well because, as you know, when I went over Thomas Clare Binger's motions, I always click on the links. And now I'm going to do the same. Okay, notice the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education here. We go on down to find where it says anything about the $160,000 deal. Well, let's see here. We go on down. And the first time I'm looking at this article, I'm looking at the tables. 2005, it says in here. Okay, I'm still looking for that one part that talks about the 160,000. And I notice this one says 2005 as well. And then this one says 2005 as well. I'm thinking, uh-oh, something's wrong. So the next thing I'm going to do is do a search on 201. I'm going to find out if the date after 2010 shows up anywhere in this article. Let's try it. 2001, and we hear that familiar little sound that says, not found. Now, does that mean that the search tool is not working? Well, I put in 200, and I get all kinds of dates. There's 200, 2005, 2004, 2005. There is something wrong here. But one thing about it is he didn't bother to put in the name of the author. Now, a lot of you would say, oh man, when you don't have the name of the author, you're just out of luck. I mean, what can you do? But I'm going to show you a little tip. I'm going to go ahead and take the title of this work. I don't know the author. Gee, if I'm writing a paper, I would really like to know. And so I'm going to go to Google Scholar. Click on Google Scholar. I'm going to put the name of the article in here. And guess what? It shows up. I'm going to click on the citation one. This is how it's cited, or how it's supposed to be cited. It's by a person named R. Slater. We do have an author. And notice something. 2007, not 2020. He tried to pull a fast one. The article doesn't date to 2020. It dates to 13 years prior to this dissertation. Why is 13 such a problem? Remember the 10-year rule. It's too old. It's likely to have the advisor say, hey, you need to update your work. And so he slides it in there as 2020. And in the citation below, he didn't write it as 2007. He wrote it as 2017. The last time I looked, the 1 and the 0 are nowhere near each other on the keyboard. That wasn't accidental.
It's like watching the British version of The Office. Like, it's funny, but awkward and sad at the same time.
Yes.
Okay, we move on. According to an article published in USA Today, a newspaper? Are you kidding me? Now, maybe the newspaper writer has some interesting quote. That's okay. If you have a newspaper article and the writer puts up something that's kind of interesting, you can cite it. It does not count for research base, though. It's designed to make your work maybe a little more engaging, but you cannot use it for research. Why? It's not a primary source. But here he wrote an article published in USA Today. These non-traditional American college students outnumber traditional American college students. That's a factual statement. You should never rely on a newspaper for something like that. And according to this, the author is Ed.D, 2018. Let's take a look at that one. Remember, we want to click on the links. And here it is. We can go ahead and go to this article. And here she is, Lee Ed.D. Now, I'm not knocking her. She's just a writer for a newspaper, okay? Older students are the new normal at college. The reason? The recession and new technology. Where does she talk about non-traditional American college students outnumbering traditional American college students? It says here, non-traditional students now outnumber those who start as 18-year-old freshmen, supported by their parents, according to data from RTI International. That's the primary source. Maybe. How do we know? We click on it. And guess what? It goes to an article written by IES. IES is a government agency that does a lot of massive scale data analysis of things like educational statistics and you name it. That's a trusted site. And therefore, I would have no problem with citing this one. But there is one issue here. This data, although it may have been published in 2017, it actually dates to 2015. He had it listed as 2018. So have we learned a lesson here? Yeah, one of the problems with using secondary sources is that the dates get all fouled up. Secondary sources are always going to make the date look fresher than it really is. And in this case here, he cited a 2018 source that actually has data that was collected in 2015. Not a big deal. The trouble is, again, citing a newspaper is a dead giveaway that you are lazy. Go to the original source, the primary source. It's the people who actually did the data collection and analysis, not a newspaper writer. Furthermore, the previous recession or the need for higher education degrees to achieve employment that supports the cost of living today was the impetus for this trend. That's a pretty big claim, and he does cite Patton, 2015. But again, we're going to look at it. And we see the problem. The title says, an examination of the ability of high school wealth and academic preparation to predict first-year retention of African American and white students enrolled in the North Carolina Community College System Associate Degree of Nursing programs. This doesn't pertain to Black Americans or white Americans as a whole. It was done on a certain analysis of community college students attending nursing programs.
Dummy.
Now you may think, well, wait a minute. Maybe there was something in this article that did pertain to these racial groups on a national scale. Fine, but it would not be primary information. It would have been collected from some other source. It would have been stated in the introduction, and therefore you would go to that primary source to cite the quote. See, it's not rocket science. By the way, you may think, well, does this even count? No. This was published on PDFS semanticscholar.org. I looked it up. Semanticscholar.org is just a place, a repository, where if you have written something and you can't get it published or you don't want to publish it, you don't care, you send it to them and they archive it. So it does not count as a publication. And I would be very leery of citing it for anything. It has not been peer-reviewed. It's the work of some author who wants to preserve the work for posterity. I have no problem with it. I've stuffed, but I would not expect anybody to cite it. Okay, so this is where things get pretty humorous. However, both groups typically possess different challenges than those of their traditional freshman student counterparts, including but not limited to family, career, learning patterns, and peer realities. And we cite Ben Yehuda, 2018. Again, this sounds very innocuous. Yeah, you read it, fine. Looks like a pretty good citation, right? No. Let's take a look at it and get ready. Put on your seatbelts. So here it is. Higher education is not prepared to deal with reentry non-traditional black males, and it has been published by the Hampton Institute. Never heard of it. But it doesn't sound like a peer-reviewed scholarly journal. There's only one way to find out. We have to click on the link. And again, throughout this entire doctoral dissertation, he's assuming that nobody's going to bother to click on the links. But we are. Okay, higher education. This is the article by Kemuel Ben Yehuda. Higher education has a major problem on its hands. And he goes on and on and on. The actual quote, colleges struggle to graduate black male students ages 25 years old and upwards when compared with their similar white male counterparts. Well, where did he get this idea? Well, it comes from the Pew Research. This is your primary source, not that article by Ben Yehuda. So why didn't he just click the link and go here to get the primary source and cite it? Laziness. So what's the problem with just using Ben Yehuda? Well, first of all, it's just an online article. It's not peer-reviewed. To find out if that means anything, we go to the original Hampton Institute website and find out more about what the Hampton Institute is about. Who are we? The Hampton Institute is a proletarian working class think tank that was founded in 2013. These are communists. Okay.
Yeah, I'm crazy. I'm the LOCO one.
Now, you might be thinking, well, now you're being unfair. Communists can put together like reliable, valid data and research, right? Yes, okay. But remember, the whole thing about this Mr. Richey deal is this contextualization of data. You see, you can't look at data just by the numbers. You have to understand the background of the data. They're all about that, putting data in its context. But when it comes to publishing stuff that was printed on a communist think tank's website, oh, we don't need to worry about it then. All data is good at that point. Let's read a little bit more. It's a virtual organization that does not have a physical location and does not seek to provide specific policy analysis for political parties. So what do? It's just a website where people contribute articles for printing. That's what a think tank in their mind is. I usually think of a think tank as a gathering of people who pull out a particular problem and they all jam on it and they come up with a certain policy result, right? They're not doing that. It's just a website archive where people can get their stuff printed as long as it sounds communist enough. Keep in mind, it says working class think tank. So they're not looking for stuff from scholars. They're looking for stuff from ordinary, everyday working class people. But those people are not necessarily experts in certain subject areas. I mean, a welder is good at welding, right? No problem with that. He probably makes double what I make. And I have a lot of respect for welders. I wished I could do it. Never learned. But when it comes to international policy formulation, I'm not going to go to a welder for his views on that because he doesn't have any background in that area. The HI was founded by Colin Jenkins, a socialist, with the purpose of giving a platform to everyday working class people to theorize, comment, analyze, and discuss matters that exist outside the confines of their daily lives. In other words, Twitter. The rigor of this online website rivals that of Twitter. And we all know what goes on in Twitter, right? That's the junk that they're going to get every day. They're not looking for information from esteemed scholars at all. We are named as a tribute to former Black Panther Party member and revolutionary martyr Fred Hampton. And I remember him. He was shot to death by I think it was the New York police, or might have been Detroit. I know it was in a big city. They barged in on him late at night, and they cut him in half with a bunch of bullets. I don't know much about the actual incident. I just remember this story about it. And also takes inspiration from Italian Marxist theorist Antonio Gramsci and educator and philosopher Paolo Freire. And Paolo, by the way, is a Marxist. It's a communist website. So all he had to do to make this a really respectable citation was click on a link and go to the original source, the Pew Center. But he didn't. He cites a communist online magazine as a source for supporting his research. That's right.
Man, you are so loco, man.
He goes on, he uses the term hyper disconnection. I have no idea what that is, and I hate it when people just formulate these grandiose statements like that. And we're going to end it here for this session with the Strayhorn citation. It says here, research has shown that the sense of belonging factor has a strong correlation to academic achievement and university degree completion by Strayhorn. Okay, he has to get this one right, right? All right, let's take a look at what Strayhorn says. And Strayhorn's article is, what role does grit play in the academic success of black male collegians at predominantly white institutions? This is an article about grit. So let's go back and read it again. It says here, research has shown that the sense of belonging factor, that's not grit, has a strong correlation to academic achievement and university degree completion. Okay, the sense of belonging factor, by the way, has been well studied. Why does he go to Strayhorn for this? Strayhorn's article isn't about that. Well, I'll tell you why. Strayhorn's article is online. It's easily available. And Strayhorn almost certainly put this in the introduction of his article. In other words, Strayhorn is not a primary source. Strayhorn was just using some other source to introduce his article. So all I have from Strayhorn is just the abstract. I don't want to pay $40 for the actual article. I mean, I enjoy tearing apart the pompous Richey man, but I'm not paying $40 to do it. But at any rate, here it reads, this study tests the importance of a non-cognitive trait, grit, to predicting grades for a sample of black males attending a predominantly white institution. You read it, there is nothing in here about a sense of belonging. It does not look like this article really targeted that as a factor at all. Again, it was probably in the introduction, and because he attends a university that allows him to pull this down for free, he simply did a little search, he saw it, he copied and pasted it in there, and he cited it. Bad, bad, bad research. So that kind of makes you wonder, like, what is the quality of the actual citations that he uses in his dissertation overall? Well, he has about 40 citations, which is really low for a dissertation, okay? But of those 40, only about 15 of them are what I would call peer-reviewed scholarly journals. Of those 15, I think maybe 8 or 9 of them were actually used properly. In other words, they were the primary sources for the claim he's making in his paper. That is pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. All right. It's pretty bad. He clearly did not learn the distinction between primary and secondary sources. He tried to pull the wool over our eyes on the dating of some of these articles. He's got all kinds of typos in there. He doesn't cite things he should. But at this point, it's just a garbage dissertation. We're going to find out in the next installment that he's going to double down on this. It's going to be really, really bad. Like my video, subscribe to my channel.